Good morning, everybody. This is Saturday. I'm in the pre-dawn moments this morning, or maybe it's hours, I should say. I was debating before actually springing into the day about the possibility of doing the celestial chatter today, because I had this break of time when nothing overtly pressing was saying, Jeff, do this, Jeff, do that, kind of. But while I was debating that, the consideration arose as to how to best present what it is that is really more, from the astrological perspective, a version of the celestial mechanics. That's what we as astrologers are actually peering into when we consider presenting anything that is an interpretation of what this celestial mechanics that is underway could present for consideration. Now, as I do these celestial chatters each week, this is a kind of a shotgun approach, very wide angle interpretation of the conversations that are transpiring between these planetary beings. And I use that term very specifically because these planets are beings no less so than we are human beings, or the trees are tree beings, or this planet that we live on is an earth being. It is alive. Each of these planets is alive. And so there's this conversation that's going on between them as they form particular celestial mechanical connections to each other, which is really more of a vibrational energy signature that they are sharing with one another all the time. So as I was contemplating this, I'm going, I can give you this shotgun version, which is that interpretation of what these planets are saying to one another. And as an astrologer, I can present this in, that wider context, which, any one of us can tune into at whatever level our particular version of those particular planetary signatures mean to us. The shotgun approach doesn't always tune into as specifically as possible to the matrix of how, and right now we're in Libra, so the Venus signature, it's up. It's the ruler of Libra. It's in Libra. But someone born like I'm born with Venus in Capricorn. Venus in Capricorn, is not necessarily considered to be doing the happy dance, to be within that Capricorn zone of, what does it mean to significantly tune into the energy of being in a position of authority. Venus is not one of those energy signatures that is saying, I want to be in control. Venus is from the Libra perspective, which is where it is right now, this is the scenario whereby all the levels of partnership and relationship they're on the table. And Libra is trying to evaluate or determine what is more and what is less worth something in any particular scenario. Venus also rules Taurus, and the Taurus perspective of Venus is not the same animal. The Venus Taurus is, how do I tune into something that is of worth to me, And it also puts one in touch with, if you're paying attention, to what does it mean to be a being here on planet Earth? Am I tuned in enough to the planetary world experience to actually be in tune with Mother Nature? Another aspect of Venus, art. All kinds of forms of art. Can I pick up my pen, pencil, paintbrush, and make a movement across a surface that presents a potential image to unfold? This is a form of art, but so is music. Can I make a tone that will cross the verbal ethers, the sound elements of life, to such an extent that you will be intrigued by it? That is a form of art as well. Back to my Capricorn Venus. I have Venus in a very tight conjunction with Jupiter there in Capricorn, within 2 degrees of each other. And that, in and of itself, for me, actually alters those so-called challenging aspects that Venus might be inclined to lean into in that Capricorn context, because Jupiter's expansion, its growth, its opportunity. So that Venus vehicle that is attuned to what does it mean to be, or to understand, or to investigate the process of relationship and partnership, or art and all that kind of stuff. The Jupiter factor that's so close to it is saying, don't hold back. I'm giving you permission to actually, expand the parameters of what it is that is transpiring to such an extent that you are not held back by, any kind of trepidation that being in a position of authority might seem to entail, or, influence in fashions that, are not overtly comfortable to some of us. Now, a little personal insight into my own astrological chart and Venus, which is, something. Anyway, back to the celestial mechanics. I said, as I got up this morning, I said, well, people don't really need to see the chart, because in a sense that is kind of like an alien language. When you look at a chart and you see all these lines going all over the place, and you see these little symbols that represent the planets and other things on the chart, it's just going, does that really mean anything to you? To us astrologers, yes, it does. But to the general layperson, it's not necessarily something. These mechanics aren't necessarily something that can inspire you to say, what more is there? But the definitions, the interpretations of what these little symbols running around on the page are bringing for consideration, which we as astrologers hopefully are tuned into, that's where the meat of it is. That's where the life gets exciting and stuff. Anyway, as I looked at the chart today, I said, because lately I've been thinking, what can I focus in on in this chart for this week that is intriguing enough for me to really delve into more specifically than all the rest of the things, because there's numerous things. And lo and behold, when I look at the chart for this week, it would, of course, not be one of those charts that's like, oh, there's just a few simple things transpiring. But no, we wouldn't have that now, would we? No, we got all kinds of things happening this week. We have Saturn later in this week is actually going to be stationing, ending its retrograde cycle. Mercury is going to be forming a trine to it. These are the mechanics of it. Venus and the Sun are traveling closer and closer together. They are actually going to be forming a aspect of conjunction within a degree of each other over an extended number of days, which is the term used for that is Casimi. When a planet is in the heart of the Sun, Venus is traveling currently on the far side of the Sun. Just from that perspective alone, when you look at the movements, this is the celestial mechanics of particularly Venus and the Sun in an experience, we always look to see which order are these three planets. Since we have them all in Libra, we can play with them. Mercury, how we analyze something. That's a Mercury thing. Venus, how we evaluate something. And the Sun, how we act. The Sun, the center of our solar system, is our action. And the order that these three planets come over the horizon sets in motion which of these energies is going to be working in a scenario with the others in which order. Right now, if I were to rotate this chart all the way around to here, so that Libra was rising, you would see that Mercury would rise first, then Venus, and then the Sun. So this sets up a pattern of how these planets are working with one another, where the very first inclination in any situation that right now from just the celestial movement of these planets is that Mercury factor. I want to analyze what is coming down the pike. What is transpiring here? I'm going to look at it and I'm going to analyze it. And the second thing is Venus comes over the horizon. So the next thing you say, well, I've analyzed it. Now I want to evaluate it. I want to make the determination where and what is at work and how can I best utilize this energy. I'm evaluating it to the benefit of myself, of the most people. It's going to be relevant or played relevantly depending on where your particular Venus is in your chart. And this is the key that I was working on this morning, is like the individual chart. That means where the planets were when you were born sets up a parameter of, this is a celestial mandala energy signature that says, I am here, I am relating to the planets in the particular pattern that was in the heavens when I was born. And from that perspective, the interpretation of what's going on in the sky now has a lot more relevance than the shotgun approach of this celestial chatter that I use. So currently, and we're going to get to, I'll throw in another thing along the way of my own chart just so you can get some particular extra insight flavor on how this might work. But Venus and the Sun traveling close together, if I were to move this chart, there we go, celestial mechanics, through the week, you're going to see that they're moving up this way. They're heading towards Scorpio. They're in, the trailing degrees of Libra. But as I move them forward, you can kind of see, there we go. Venus is now within a degree of the sun. It's Wednesday. You know, the Casimi energy is thinking, we should define Casimi. You know, I don't even know what language it comes from, but the interpretation of a Casimi is when something is that close to that solar energy signature, and the sun can be seen as the king quite easily, and that Leonian, I am the leader kind of energy. But when a planet is that close, the Casimi energy, what comes into play is that there's a recognition by the sun for the position that that particular planet is occupying, and saying, wow, you're coming in that close to me. You're obviously not feeling threatened by this kingly leadership things. And I want to thank you for the presence, for your presence, and to honor that. What I'm going to do is I am going to provide you with the opportunity to see what it's like, to experience the process of what it means to be the king, to sit on the throne of the king. This is Casimi, and it's a rare moment that often passes by quite quickly. But in this particular case, Venus and the sun are actually moving at a rate compared to our Earth right now that is very, very similar in speed. So they're going to be traveling together on into next week in this Casimi pattern. You see, we're here on Wednesday now, coming, and then if we were to go to Thursday, you can kind of see they're getting closer and closer. Friday, closer even so. Saturday, they're in the same degree. They're only a few minutes apart. And then on Sunday, what happens? They both traverse together in Casimi across the axis between the Libra sign and the Scorpio sign. That's a big signature. That's probably, of all the aspects that are transpiring this week, I would say that the sun going into Scorpio is enormous. But at the same time, to have Venus in Casimi to it, coming out of the sign of Libra into Scorpios, because Libra is about, what are all the manifestations of what it means to be in partnership? How can I best energetically use that? And when the shift transpires from Libra to Scorpio, which the Sun and Venus do simultaneously, it's kind of like the expansion of what did it mean to be in the realm of partnership with others, because Scorpio expands the parameters of the Libra tent and says, what might we develop together as we expand this process of partnership? Might there be an investigation into intimacy? One option that Scorpio always brings to the table, but also looking at what mysteries surface or have surfaced or can surface if we were but to really tune in so dynamically with one another that there was an energy flow between us that didn't or wasn't hampered by outside factors getting in the way of delving much more deeply into what mysteries are going to surface if we openly investigate what can transpire between us. Anyway, the week. And, the celestial mechanics, there it is, laid out in two dimensionals in a chart on the things. And there are so many other factors that come into play this week. As I look down the thing, that extended Casimi and also the shift into Scorpio. Those are the two main factors that I saw this week, but they're not the only ones, because when we get to the weekend, I think that's when the 22nd happens. Saturday, the weekend. Saturn, yeah, Saturday, which is a Saturn day, by the way. That's, that Saturn and Saturday. You can kind of see that similarity in those two terms. On that day, Saturn says, I've been going retrograde for a long season right now, and perhaps it's time that I shifted around. It's the celestial mechanics. The Earth's orbit has now reached a point where Saturn is going to appear to start moving forward again. And we've gone through the cycle. In any retrograde cycle, what a planet does is it goes back over degrees that we've already been before to make sure that we didn't overlook something in that process. And so there's a deeper diving into, or investigating what it is that Saturn, going through, in this case, going through that particular part of the zodiac, may have brought up, but needed a little bit more looking at. Anyway, this is one of those aspects that I was talking about, because I have two planets at 18 degrees of Aquarius, and they are only 8 minutes apart. One is Mercury, the other is Mars. So this Saturn, which is the ruler of Aquarius, traditional ruler of Aquarius, is stationing right on my Mercury and Mars. Mercury, how I communicate in a Martian fashion, which, there's a drive to what it is that I get inspired to say. It's like always been there in my life. And this Saturn coming to station right on those two particular planets is, Saturn is life lessons. It's the teacher planet. And this will be probably the second or third time in my life that this has transpired, because Saturn takes 30 years, 28 to 30 years to make the loop around the zodiac. Mine started out in Virgo, so yeah, this will be I don't know, second or third time. Anyway, so for me, the choice of vocabulary that I'm inspired, there's that Martian energy, that I'm driven, inspired, like, to utilize as I'm making points to draw you into the dance, this celestial dance that's transpiring. For me, this says, there's a current version of life lessons about just what might be the most appropriate way for me to utilize that Mercury Mars energy in a way to be in Aquarius fashion. This is where the energy, that planetary conversation comes in an Aquarius fashion, to say, can I stimulate or inspire within you an aspect of what part of the group context of the conversation that I am sharing with you might be attractive enough for you to be able to tune in more specifically to how a group energy format might be appropriate or more appropriate to what it is you need to tune into when that option puts in an appearance. For me, it's just there. I'm an Aquarius. The group energy that is the key to why my soul incarnated here on planet Earth on this time. To keep that fire burning, that Mars fire burning, in a way that the words that I use and am inclined to utilize can be an inspiration to others to recognize the soul connection that we actually have with one another and with everything that is part of the living experience. There really is no such thing as separation, except in perhaps the minds of some human individuals who, through their training have been, driven to an experience that wants to separate and see things as apart from one another. And that doesn't really benefit, a scenario whereby people can appreciate, trust, and benefit from being with one another. We're in Libra, so the Libra thoughts have a lot to do with that Venus right now in Libra, very close to the sun, saying, and right now this is the last week of Libra. So the whole scenario of what does it mean to engage with others at an potentially intimate level, because we're going into Scorpio soon, but more so the finding commonality of shared ground, whereby we can see the benefits that we might present to one another in any experience where we are drawn together. And, if I were to just go together right here to Sunday, I'm not inclined to delve too heavily into the Scorpionic signature, even though it arrives on Sunday, but next week I definitely will. Also, we're coming to next week, you can see the moon right here is approaching one more time. It's going to be a new moon, this time in Scorpio, that will be at exactly 2 degrees and 0 minutes of Scorpio. And that will be the next new moon. It's within basically 11 degrees of the south node, so it will be an eclipse. And I was invited by a friend this week to actually participate with them in a discussion on Zoom this Friday at 5 o'clock Pacific time on the factor of this upcoming eclipse. I'm not going to delve into it here and now. If you're interested, stay tuned. And when I become aware of what form, I think it's going to be a Zoom contact betwixt us that this is transpiring in, I will let you know. Anyway, there are so many aspects that are happening this week. If I go back just a few days to our Tuesday of this coming week, Venus, which here you can kind of see is in a nice trine with Mars. Venus, that receptive feminine quality in doing a trine dance, which is, there's a harmony in the trine. And Libra is about trying to discover harmony. It doesn't necessarily mean it will effectively discover it, but that's what it's searching for. And this harmony to Mars down there in Gemini at the degree, 1 degree away from, or less than a degree away from, maybe it's a whole degree, from the degree that it is going to also be going retrograde at the end of this month there in Gemini, which will be 25 degrees of Gemini. But anyway, this Mars, masculine energy, stirring around in the element of curiosity in a harmonious dance with Venus up there, working so very close to that solar core. So you can kind of potentially feel that, there's this pull to discover aspects of the harmonious level of what life can be about with one another. And this Martian curiosity saying, what does that mean? How can I utilize that? What's going on here? Anyway, as you can see, there's always a lot going on at the celestial chatter level. And the celestial mechanics, that's not necessarily something everybody has to pay attention to, because we as astrologers, hopefully, within the context of meaningfulness, will present to you options on just how those larger levels of conversation that these planetary beings are having might be something to tune into ourselves. I got to show you just a little bit of insight into how these are playing with me, but it's not going to be the same for every one of us. You may have your Venus in Gemini. You may have a curiosity that says, what does the experience of relationship actually mean? And right now, because we're in Libra, and we've got that Mars signature from Gemini down there to that Venus coming up this week, the drive is just a little bit more intense for you to pay attention to what's transpiring with whoever that other happens to be. But this is individual chart interpretation, which I continue to do. And if you would like a little bit more insight, drop me a line. AstroShapeshifting.com, The Lively Astrologer, those are my two handles. I get emails at either one of them. And perhaps there might be just a little bit more insight able to be gleaned from what it is that you very particularly signed up for as a soul being in the current incarnation, that somehow you sense but have not been able to put your finger exactly on. This is the purpose, the appropriate purpose of utilizing this astrology language to inspire you to be all that you intended to be when you started this incarnational journey. Until next week, Scorpio, the first lunar eclipse of this eclipse season. I think there's going to be 3 eclipses. Let's do the dance together. See you next week.